All right, welcome to our lesson and activity on discerning the difference between high and low scoring FRQs in AP Human Geography. The lecture and slideshow was put together by myself, Chris Gall, and I'll be using materials that are publicly available from the College Board if you want to go look at them yourself. So what we're going to actually use is the 2017 FRQ Prompt number 2. So if you want to go ahead, pause the video here for just a moment and go ahead and read the prompt. What we're going to do is I will walk you through student samples for parts B and D, and then I'm going to have you try and write on your own parts A and C, and you'll score those using the assignments that are up in, or using the criteria and stuff that are up in Canvas for you to do so. So take a moment, go ahead, pause the video, read that prompt, and then I will see you on the next slide. Okay, so what I'm going to do is walk you through these criteria, explain them a little bit, and then I will actually let you read on your own the student responses. And then I'll walk through why the judges gave them the points that they gave them, or why the readers gave them the points that they gave them. Okay, so part B was worth 3 points because you had to explain 3 different factors that contribute to high population growth rates. Okay, so for 1, it's a lack of access to medical care or contraceptives. You could reference either one there. Or just that there's not information about family planning. Okay. There's high infant or child mortality rates, high incidence of disease or epidemics. So you could get that point by going either way. Okay. 3, that there's a lack of educational access or opportunities for girls and women, but this is not one that talks about family planning. So if somebody's talking about educational access and opportunities for girls and women, and they're talking about knowledge about health, or they're talking about knowledge about family planning, that's going to go under B1, not B3. Okay, if they're just talking about how girls don't have access to schools and how they are not, attending elementary school, junior high, high school kind of stuff, that's going to be a B3. Okay. For number 4, traditional social practices that discourage women from working outside the home. Those often result in higher birth rates. Children being seen as laborers. Okay. Cultural or religious preference for male children or large families. Low level of human development, low HDI, or low level of economic development, high rates of poverty. Oftentimes, high rates of poverty and low HDI will correlate, not 100% of the time, but pretty close. Okay. Worth noting though that low HDI also kind of gets at that idea of women in general and where women are at, or where children are at in terms of their quality of life in particular. If it's for number 8, primarily agrarian, rural, or mainly small village communities, which is kind of a way of getting back to that idea of high rates of poverty, okay, or children being used as laborers. But it is also slightly different. Number 9, early marriages, a lack of laws or a lack of enforcement of the laws that set a minimum age for marriage. For number 10, a pronatalist government policies, government incentives for families with children, or policies that restrict or prohibit family planning programs. Okay. Number 11, the results of wars, disasters, and environmental crises. And number 12, decreasing death rates. Okay. So when I read this in 2017, and I did end up reading it for the last couple of days, I got retrained on it. We saw a lot of kids getting points in 1 and 2 and 5. Sometimes we'd see something about 3, really the wars one, the decreasing death rates one, pronatalist policies, not very common at all. The poverty one sometimes, okay. Cultural religious preference for male children, again, just not quite as much. Okay, so when the College Board releases these things, they release 3 student samples. One that's a high scorer, one that's somewhere in the middle, and one that's a low scorer. So this is the high scoring sample, and this is what this student wrote for part B. I'm going to ask you again to pause the video, take a moment, read their response, and reflect on that rubric on the last slide. And see if you can figure out what points you feel like they get, because I will tell you this much, that they do get some points. So like I said, pause the video and I'll pick up with you on the next slide. Okay, so the judges, that is to say the readers, said for this response, the response earned 1 point for explaining the lack of information about family planning for women regarding birth control methods as a factor that contributes to high population growth rates. So that's a clear B1. Okay, an additional point for explaining that children are seen as a source of labor, which results in large families, contributes to high population growth rates. That's a clear B5. Okay, and a third point in Part B for explaining that high child mortality due to diseases, okay, so they're hitting both that lots of kids are dying, but they're being very specific about diseases, leads families to have more children, which then is a contributing factor to high population growth rates. And that's a clear B2. So this particular student was very good in terms of what they said and the ways that they explained things and things like that. There was not much question in the readers' minds about what was meant and how many points to give and things like that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and have you take a look. This is the medium scoring response to Part B. I will tell you that they scored points as well, and just ask you to take a moment, read it, see if you can figure out where you think they scored the points and which points you think that they scored. Okay, so the judges, that is to say the readers, said that the response gets 1 point in Part B for explaining that children are a source of labor, resulting in high fertility rates, right? So that's a clear B5. They kind of start that at the beginning, and then they really pick it up, hammer home that B5 at the end. So if I was the reader, maybe I had some questions about it initially as I get all the way down, and then I read about agricultural workers. Right now I'm very clear. They get that point. They get 1 point for explaining high child mortality leads families to have more children. Okay, so not quite as clear as the first one, but still definitely there, and that again is a B2. Okay, and then they get the third point for explaining that the lack of information for women regarding contraceptives. Okay, and it's really nice as a reader when you're using kind of those keywords like contraceptives, because that then gives the reader, not that we get a checklist of words, but it's one where I can, as I'm reading it, I can say, oh yeah, nope, that's very clear, I got that. They're using the exact word that I would hope to see. All right, if you use the words family planning, similar kind of idea. So our low scoring response, I'll just go ahead and read this one to you. 3 factors that contribute to high rates of natural increase are poor economy, high birth rates, low death rates. Take just a sec, pause about that, see if you think there's enough there for a point or 2 points, and then we'll take a look, see what the judges say. And the judges say, that is the readers, the response earned no credit in Part B. And really they earn no credit because they're supposed to be explaining about it, they're supposed to be talking about it, and it's a list, first of all. But it's also a list that doesn't address the prompt. Right? Poor economy, what does that mean? How is that related to birth rates? To really get this point, you had to explain what the poor economy meant for increase rates. Okay? You know, birth rates, yeah, okay, I see where that could play in, but how do you know that there's high birth rates? What's contributing to that? Right? And low death rates, that's, you know, again, how do you know that that's happening? What does that mean? And that's not even really, truthfully, part of Part B. You're going to find that on the rubric when we look at Part D. Okay. So speaking of Part D, right, I'll go ahead and read this rubric to you just because I know it's a little bit fuzzy. Part D was talking specifically about social programs to decrease population growth and then the potential impact of that strategy or of that program. Okay, so number 1 is promoting family planning or reproductive health education. 2, increasing education for girls, promoting of higher education for women, which again is separate from and different than reproductive health education. Okay, implementing anti-natalist policies that limit the number of children. The most common response with that one was the one-child policy in China, and this was right around the time they changed it, if not maybe a little bit before, but I think it was just after. Number 4, improving healthcare for women, infants, and children. 5, producing media or ad campaigns showing the benefits of family planning practice. 6, promoting urbanization. 7, changing, implementing, or enforcing laws about increasing the minimum age at marriage. So those were really the 7 social programs or policies that you could come up with. some version of. And then in terms of impacts, reduced birth rates or fertility rates, it is not enough to say that the population is going down, because maybe the population is going down because more people are dying. Okay, so it's too generic to say that population is dropping. A move from stage 2 to stage 3, the demographic transition, and if you recall correctly, that's the point where birth rates and death rates are both still going down. Right? Fewer children leading to more resources for better education or healthcare, improved gender equality or female empowerment. Right? That's especially an outcome coming to do with increasing education or economic opportunities for women. Right? Conflicts between traditional social norms and new population programs. Increased social tension between men and women. That one's F. Right? And that's also tends to be, you tend to see that in societies where there's increasing education for women and increased social and economic power. You'll see a skewed gender ratio, especially in those societies where boys tend to be more valued than girls, and so as a result, when you've got laws or rules that are discouraging the number of births, parents will oftentimes use something like, say, selective abortion in order to have a boy, which then skews the gender ratio. And last but not least, number H, there is an increased elderly dependency ratio, the population aging, or reduced youth dependency ratio, and all of those kind of get at the same basic ideas. Okay, so I'm going to have you go ahead, read the high scoring response to Part D, see where you think the points are, and then I will meet you on the next slide. So go ahead and pause the video for just a sec here. Okay, the judges say that the response earned 1 point for describing a social program promoting family planning for women. That's a clear D1. Okay, an additional point for identifying the potential impact of a declining crude birth rate. Okay, and because they were specific and they said birth rate, they're going to get the A for the social impact. Okay, our medium scoring response here, and I'll have you pause it and take a moment to read this, and tell me how many points you think it gets. And see if you can figure out where you think the points are. So go ahead and pause the video here. Okay, so the medium scoring response to Part D is basically the judges said that they got 1 point for describing social programs promoting family planning and reproductive health education for women. They did not get the second point. They didn't say enough really about what that impact would be. Okay, and our low scoring response, one social program could be an increase in government-funded availability of contraceptives that could lead to less pregnancies and therefore a smaller population. Think about it for just a moment. Decide if you think it gets 0, 1, or 2 points. And the judges say 1 point for describing social program promoting family planning through government programs. Okay, they didn't get the second point because they didn't talk about birth rates going down. Yes, they did say population rates. They did not say birth rates, and that's a key critical component there. Okay, so the high scoring response on this one got all 8 points, the medium got 6 out of 8, and the low scoring response got 3 out of 8. Unless you're being asked to identify or define, you need to elaborate in order to get the points. And elaborating in this case means to include examples, to provide complete thoughts, make your connections explicit, include all of the relevant information. Be specific in your descriptions and information. In short, what you really want to do is pretend that your audience is smart, like you are, but uninformed, like you were before you started studying geography. In other words, they're capable of taking your point if you explain yourself well. You can't assume that they know anything. Okay? So don't think they can read your mind. I'm not reading your FRQs at the reading. Okay, I'll read other people's, and other people will read yours. So you have to assume that they can take your meaning, but they don't know it. They don't know. You don't know what they don't know. So you got to fill in the blanks and make the connections clear. Okay, what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and write the answers to parts A and C, and use the scoring criteria to score them. You'll go back to the assignment in Canvas to do that. Okay, be careful that you can assign specific criteria to any points. There are no, it should have been on the rubric, or I meant to say, points on the AP exam. Make sure that your answer is complete. Okay, and we just talked about what that meant. Once you're done with that, go ahead and complete the survey, and